Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm excited. My name is Kelly Hampton. I am a program manager with Break the Cycle. I am excited to welcome everyone to our first Love is Not Abuse webinar. Today, we will be discussing the Dating Abuse Foundations. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I am excited to welcome everyone to our first Love is Not Abuse webinar. Today, we will be discussing Dating Abuse Foundations. My name is Kelly Hampton, and I am the Program Manager of the Training and Technical Assistance team here at Break the Cycle. I am joined today by my colleagues Nicole Varma, Aaron Clark, Damian Frierson, and Katie Ward. Before we begin, I will briefly go over some logistics for today's webinar. If you are disconnected from the webinar at any time, please go back to the original email and click on the link again to log back in. If you have any problems getting back on, please call iLink support at 1-800-799-4510. We will be muting everyone on the call today and using the chat feature for any questions, problems, or comments you may have. You can find the chat box on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. If you happen to only be on the audio portion of this webinar, you can email Katie Ward at kward@breakthecycle.org with questions or comments. We will have space for questions throughout the webinar. Please chat your questions. If we can't answer them on this call, we will reach out to you afterwards, or please reach out to us. We have a lot of ground to cover today, and we want to make sure that we can address all of your questions and thoughts. If you run into any technical problems, please send a private chat to me, Kelly, and you can use the chat box to do this. Click on the gray private tab that's to the right of the public tab inside the chat box. Double-click on my name, and then you'll be able to type just to me. We will be sending out both the PowerPoint slides and the link to this recording, so don't fret if you miss something. We will also have a short poll at the end of the webinar to gather your thoughts. Before I begin the substantive portion of the webinar, I'd like to take a moment to talk about Love is Not Abuse, or LINA for short, and give a brief history of LINA and an update of what's happening now. In 1991, Liz Claiborne became the first major corporation in America to take a stand on domestic violence when it launched Women's Work, an anti-abuse public service awareness campaign known by its tagline, Love is Not Abuse. In 1995, the program was adapted to focus primarily on college students. In 1998, the Women's Work program shifted its focus to parents and created a parent's handbook, How to Talk to Your Children About Developing Healthy Relationships. In 2005, Liz Claiborne partnered with Break the Cycle to create a teen dating violence prevention curriculum. The Love is Not Abuse curriculum, which was launched in April 2006 and updated in 2010, has now been distributed to more than 11,000 schools and organizations in all 50 states. We are currently updating the curriculum again, so if you are downloading and learning it for the first time, please know that it will change and will be re-released this fall. Please look out for any announcements about the new curriculum and webinars to familiarize yourself with that curriculum. Another one of Liz Claiborne's fabulous efforts was the It's Time to Talk Day events. These events included more than 28 hours of talk radio airtime dedicated to the subject of domestic violence, which aired on more than 900 stations, reaching more than 12.5 million listeners nationwide. The 2014 It's Time to Talk Day will be happening in several cities in early 2014 to highlight Teen Dating Violence Prevention and Awareness Month in February. We will be announcing dates and cities for It's Time to Talk Day on our Facebook and email alerts in the next few weeks, so please keep a lookout for those. An additional aspect of Love is Not Abuse is the Love is Not Abuse Coalition, which was launched in 2008 and is a growing national grassroots coalition of parents, teachers, service providers, and anyone who is advocating for teen dating abuse education in middle school and high schools. Through the Love is Not Abuse website, now found on breakthecycle.org, you can become a member. You can download resources to contact your schools and legislators, and you can receive the Love is Not Abuse curriculum. In October of 2012, Love is Not Abuse moved to the Break the Cycle umbrella. Break the Cycle, for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, was founded in 1996 and is a leading national nonprofit organization that provides preventive dating and domestic violence education and outreach to teens and young adults. With offices in LA and Washington, D.C., Break the Cycle also provides legal services, so direct representation for young people ages 12 to 24, and provides technical assistance for secondary schools who are seeking to improve prevention, intervention, and response to dating abuse. This spring, we finished migrating the Love is Not Abuse website to breakthecycle.org. If you are not yet a member, you still can become a member and find the curriculum and download resources on Break the Cycle's website. If you have trouble locating anything related to Love is Not Abuse or the Coalition, please do not hesitate to contact or call Nicole Varma at nvarma@breakthecycle.org. Nicole Varma is the grassroots coordinator for Break the Cycle and is based in our DC office. Nicole oversees the Lena brand and the Lena Coalition. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about the Coalition, please reach out to her. Again, her email address is nvarma, V-A-R-M-A, @breakthecycle.org. I'd like to highlight one of our current public awareness campaigns, How Do You Define Love? Because we often hear about dating abuse framed in the negative, we'd like to reframe this issue in the positive by helping our young people determine what a healthy relationship is for them. As part of this reframing, we are asking our Lena members to help us define love. Please go to www.breakthecycle.org/Lena Define Love for more details. That brings us to this webinar series. We want to make sure that everyone in our Lena Coalition and anyone doing this work is prepared and ready to bring the new and improved curriculum to your local schools. So we have developed this 3-part webinar series entitled The Building Blocks of Success to assist you in implementing the new Lena curriculum this fall and to give you the tools for promoting other anti-violence work in your community. Our next webinar will be on September 17th, focusing on how to engage school and community partners. Before jumping into the content of our webinar today, I'd like to share just a bit more with you about Break the Cycle. Our mission at Break the Cycle is to engage, educate, and empower young people to build lives and communities free from domestic and dating violence. We are a leading national nonprofit organization working exclusively on dating abuse. We work to support young people ages 12 to 24 to prevent and respond to dating abuse. Break the Cycle has offices in LA and DC with staff in Austin, Texas, co-located with the National Dating Abuse Helpline. We provide prevention education to young people nationwide and work with youth and adults to raise awareness about dating abuse. Finally, we advocate for changes in laws and systems to better protect the rights and promote the health of youth nationwide and help organizations build the capacity to better serve youth. Much of our work is done through our partnership with the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. Working together to run loveisrespect.org, we serve as the largest resource in the country for young people experiencing abuse. This brings me to our goals for today's webinar. By the end of this webinar, it is my hope you will be better able to define and understand some key dynamics of dating abuse. We are also going to look at the key influencers of dating abuse and discuss what kinds of factors can impact youth dating relationships. Finally, we will identify the warning signs of dating abuse for both the victim or survivor of the abuse as well as the partner perpetrating abuse. We will be facilitating 2 further webinars in this series that will walk through how to engage schools to do this work and how to work with survivors. Let's take a minute for a thought activity. If you could, please close your eyes and picture yourself when you were 15 years old. Now, I can't see you all, so I'm going to trust that you are following along, but I'm going to ask a series of questions. First, what clothes were you wearing? How did you wear your hair? Who was your best friend? Who was your crush? What did you think you would be like when you grew up? What did you think of the adults in your life? How did you feel about your increasing independence? Okay, thank you for going there with me. If you feel comfortable, please share something about your 15-year-old self in the chat. Anything you want to share is good. Everyone has a different experience growing up, though there are some experiences that most young people share. Please keep that 15-year-old version of yourself in your mind as we talk today. It can be very difficult to put ourselves in the place of the young people we are working with. When we discuss dating abuse, we are referring to abusive behaviors used to exert power and control over a dating partner. This definition is an evolving one, but it is adapted from the language of the Violence Against Women Act. This definition of dating abuse should sound familiar to those of you who have had some experience with or training on domestic violence. That's because, in many ways, teen dating abuse and domestic violence are similar. You may hear other terms used besides dating abuse to describe what we are talking about today, including adolescent relationship abuse, dating violence, and teen dating violence. These terms are all appropriate depending on where and when they are used. We use the term dating abuse because we work with youth and young adults, not just teens. And dating abuse because dating violence can be limiting to just violent acts, whereas dating abuse describes a broader set of actions. So let's take a closer look at what we mean when we say dating abuse. First, notice that dating abuse is a pattern of behavior. This doesn't mean that the first instance of abuse is not dating abuse, or that all abusive relationships will follow the same pattern. But we do know that dating abuse usually involves a series of abusive behaviors that happen over the course of time. And once abuse happens for the first time, it is likely to happen again. The pattern that many of you are familiar with is probably the cycle of abuse. The cycle can be a helpful way of thinking about how abuse plays out in a relationship, but be careful not to get stuck in one way of thinking about that pattern. Some people describe their abusive relationships as a cycle. Some others describe it as a wave or a spectrum. And still others don't feel that their relationship fits into any of these models. A relationship may not fit into one of the established models of a pattern, but it could still be unhealthy and abusive. So what does dating violence really look like? Here are a few examples of abusive behaviors reported by teens that we have worked with at Break the Cycle and Love is Respect. It can be difficult for a young person to identify what is abusive versus what is unhealthy or healthy, which we will discuss later in the webinar. What is the most important thing is to understand that there are lots of different types of abuse beyond just physical abuse. Emotional and verbal abuse can be harder to identify, but may be even more present. Teens are especially vulnerable to this type of abuse through use of technology. So some of the examples you see on the screen are spreading rumors, refusing to practice safe sex, threatening self-harm, so an abusive partner actually threatening to harm themselves if something continues to go on in a relationship, threatening to out someone's sexuality or gender identity when they don't want that information shared with the public, forcing unwanted sexual activity. We know that that is a very, very big one in the lives of young people. And on the right, there are some examples of abusive behaviors that can occur using technology. So texting constantly to monitor someone, threatening to post provocative pictures, stealing passwords to an online account, etc. You may recognize the power and control wheel shown here from the Domestic Abuse Intervention Project in Duluth, Minnesota. The image shows a teen-specific version of the power and control wheel that is available on loveisrespect.org. Members of our Love is Respect National Youth Advisory Board provided input on this wheel so that it is relevant to young people. The power and control wheel is a visual that you can use as a tool when teaching young people about abuse and violence. It illustrates that abusive behaviors are merely the tactics that an abusive partner uses to exert power and control over a dating partner. Due to the trauma some young people have experienced, they may have a difficult time identifying abusive behaviors as attempts to gain power and control. It is your job to help young people see and understand what power and control really means. This is available on loveisrespect.org on our website, and when you access it, you can just hover over the circle, and certain things will pop up, and you can see the explanations of different terms. So, for instance, right now it's focused on isolation and exclusion, and if you move your cursor around the wheel, peer pressure, using social status, threats, all of that will pop up and give you a description. It's a very cool tool. So here's a question for you. What is dating, and what is a dating partner? If you could, please type into the chat common words or phrases you have heard that young people use to describe dating or dating partners. Some of the examples that we hear often are hooking up, talking like we're talking, my boo, we are Instagram official or Facebook official. And you've probably heard even other examples from the young people that you work with or from your kids. But one thing we know is that dating looks different at different ages. So for instance, your 15-year-old self might have considered dating a much different thing than your 30-year-old self. Casual or serious, short-term or long-term, gay or straight, sexual or non-sexual, monogamous or not, you cannot make assumptions about what dating means for any individual. It is important to learn how teens define dating or being in a relationship and to use that definition when you're interacting with them. And I don't necessarily mean if they tell you that they're hooking up or it's their boo or whatever to use their words back to them, because it might come across as inauthentic if you say those words back to them. But just to understand what they mean so that then you can use that definition as you give advice or counsel or guidance to those young people. It can often be difficult for a young person to determine what dating really is and the scope of it. So just being aware of that is important. Dating abuse may not often be talked about, but it is extremely prevalent, and it can happen to anyone. 1 in 3 teen girls experience some kind of abuse in their romantic relationships, including verbal and emotional abuse. And during the 12 months before taking the YRBSS survey, so the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, almost 10% of middle and high school students surveyed had been hit, slapped, or physically hurt on purpose by their boyfriend or girlfriend. 10%. That's a very high number. Finally, young women between the ages of 16 and 24 experience the highest per capita rates of dating abuse. When looking at that second statistic on this slide, it is important to remember that this number might be higher for sexual and emotional abuse. It is harder to recognize emotional and sexual abuse, especially with sexual abuse being such a difficult topic to talk about and the lines being blurred when you involve the use of alcohol. Also, it is not just young women, but young men who are also experiencing dating abuse. They may be afraid to report this abuse due to social stigma and other factors, like be a man, be tough, suck it up. It's not abuse, you're the man in the relationship. Those are the messages young men are hearing, and that tends to be an obstacle or a barrier to reporting abuse. When it comes to dating and relationships, young people engage with relationships and seeking help in different ways than many adults. But there are also many similarities in adult and youth experiences of abuse. Youth experience the same patterns of abuse as adults. They experience similar types of abuse, just sometimes by different methods. They also experience the same intensity. Their relationships are real, and there is love there. They experience the same difficulty leaving a relationship because they are part of the same community as the abusers, for instance, at school or in extracurricular activities. Oftentimes we hear from adults who we are talking to that young people have they don't have love in a relationship. They may not actually be dating. They don't face the similar difficulties in leaving a relationship, and we just want to assure you that they do, although it might look a little different for young people. So dating abuse is a very complex issue, and there are several key influencers for both dating habits of young people and then also abusive patterns in youth relationships. Let's take a minute now to discuss the types of abuse or the types of social and environmental factors that influence youth dating behavior. The socio-ecological model has been widely used in the public health field as a way to understand the social and environmental factors that influence an individual's choices and behaviors. It can help us think about how dating behaviors among young people can be influenced by society, community, interpersonal relationships, and individual development. This model identifies certain factors and individual experiences that may put him or her at a higher risk of becoming involved in dating abuse. More specifically, several factors like peers, schools, neighborhoods, social norms, and laws have an impact on a young person's risk of becoming involved in dating abuse as either a perpetrator or as a survivor or victim. Many times people blame an individual for their involvement in an abusive relationship. However, it is vital to consider all environmental factors, including the role of parents and guardians or community norms that might influence any individual's actions. Let's take a closer look at some of the most important factors that influence youth dating behavior. I will start with the importance of peer groups. Peer groups are very important and influential in a young person's life, and that is an understatement. When a young person's peers start experiencing new relationships, they feel pressure to start dating themselves. They also feel pressured to have certain types of relationships and to have sex before they are ready. Furthermore, places like school can be very closed communities, making it very difficult to break away from a peer group. You are always around the same people. Think back to that 15-year-old self of yours from early on in the webinar. It can be you're getting on the bus with the same people, you might actually walk to school with the same people, in the same classes, lunchtime, cafeteria, you're going to see the same folks over and over again. Let me move now to lack of resources. Young people do not have access to many of the resources that adults do, This can include access to money, transportation, or health services. This can make it very difficult for a young person to find assistance or to leave a relationship in which they may be financially dependent upon a partner. They also have a lack of resources as far as not knowing some important things about communication, managing relationships, and so on, because they are still growing, learning, and that can also contribute to a lack of sort of just emotional resources that they can pull from. Ongoing brain development. The brain goes through dramatic changes during the adolescent years. Adolescence is a time when reasoning and logic skills are developing. Young people start to question established ideas and authority and think in more abstract terms. They start to develop self-control and eventually begin to process emotions more maturely. Younger adolescents may take more risks than older youth because the part of the brain that controls impulses and engages in long-term perspective matures later on in life. I find the brain development piece to be very fascinating, and it's interesting to relate it directly to the experience of dating relationships. Moving to developing identity. Adolescence is defined by a sense of developing autonomy. With this, adolescents carefully develop a sense of self. This includes figuring out one's talents, goals, and values surrounding religion, politics, and culture. This is also a time when one's self-esteem is developing, which is tied with establishing social status among parents, adults, and peers. Moving to varied life experience. Though some youth have experienced more than many adults in their lives, some may have very limited life experience. Either way, their life experience is comprised of what they have learned from their friends, family, and the media. This will have an impact on how they perceive dating and what it means to have a healthy relationship. Technology often plays a major role in the relationships of young people, so moving to prevalence of media and technology. And I would like to take a closer look at technology and media because there is so much there to talk about. Here are some examples of how teens have been shown to use technology in their relationships. Again, these behaviors fall on a spectrum. There can be healthy interactions, such as using technology to start a relationship. They can communicate in healthy ways, and they can use technology to seek help if there is a violent or unhealthy episode. But there can also be unhealthy and abusive interactions via technology, including arguing, hanging up or ignoring a partner's communication attempts, ignoring a partner by texting or taking phone calls in their presence, and breaking up with a partner via cell phone. Finally, there can also be abusive behaviors that can occur via technology, such as monitoring a partner, trying to control their activities, emotional or verbal aggression via cell phone or on a social networking site. So electronic communications and technological influences, they influence dating abuse by redefining the boundaries between dating partners. The abuse that teens experience through technology may not appear in person. It may not be obvious. On the other hand, the abuse that teens experience through technology may be the starting point for abuse to escalate in person. Even though technology is not necessarily dangerous, it can be used easily as a passive means of teen dating abuse and a means of power and control. And we all know, too, that most young people were born these days, they were born into an environment where cell phones are the norm, or Facebook and social networking is the norm. Researchers have called this that young people are technological natives, tech natives, right? They have grown up in this world. So trying to stop them from using technology is not a great tactic. It's more about learning how to handle that technology appropriately and how to draw the line when someone is misusing technology. So I want to ask a poll question. How many young people have been called names, harassed, or put down by their partner over cell phones or texting? So 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 10, or 1 in 20. I'll give you just a second to answer that question, and then I'll tell you the answer. So there has been a lot of discussion now about what previously was a new form of abuse that is called tech or digital abuse. It's not really the abuse that's new, right? It's the medium. New forms of technology do present new challenges to parents and service providers. For example, they give teens unprecedented access to their dating partners, both in healthy and abusive relationships, and they allow much of teens' communication to take place beyond the visibility of parents and other adults. Technology allows information, positive and negative, to travel faster than ever before to dating partners, friends, classmates, and the community beyond the school. But the abusive behaviors playing out over this new technology, for example, cell phones and social media, are often the same ones that we have always seen. It's important not to let technology distract us from the underlying abuse. And so the answer to that question was 1 in every 4 say that they have been called names, harassed, or put down by their partner through cell phones and texting. 1 in every 3 young people say they've been texted 10, 20, or 30 times an hour by a partner, finding out where they are, what they're doing, or who they are with. And I want to highlight that one. 1 in every 3 say that they've been texted 10, 20, or 30 times an hour. Okay, 30 times an hour. Would that be crazy to you if someone was texting you 30 times in an hour? I ask that because for me, anyone texting me 30 times an hour, that would be a lot for me. I'm not used to either sending or receiving that number of text messages from any one person in that period of time. But young people are much more accepting of that level of communication because they all text all of the time, right? So I ask this question for young people, and they often tell me, oh, Kelly, 30 times an hour is not a big deal. And I just have to point out that they're right. It's not a big deal if that's the boundary that they've set for themselves. What is a big deal is if, 1, they don't want that number of text messages in that period of time from someone, and they have communicated that, or 2, the type of messages that they're getting are the ones that are monitoring or controlling messages. So, for instance, the where they are, what they're doing, or who they are with. We, as Break the Cycle, we like to say, watch out for the W's. You know, so who, what, where, when, you know, that kind of a text message. This information is from a series of surveys. This particular survey was done in 2007, but there's an updated one entitled Tech Abuse in Teen Relationships, and it's done by Teen Research Unlimited for Liz Claiborne. There are a large number of negative impacts that dating abuse can have on a young person. These impacts present themselves often as warning signs that individuals working with youth should be aware of. First, it is important to know and understand the different warning signs of dating abuse for both the survivor and the partner perpetrating abuse. You may be able to recognize these warning signs when you work with young people. Also, it is important to understand the obstacles to identifying abuse and to seeking help so that you can be better equipped to help young people overcome these obstacles. So let's take a look at warning signs from the perspective of the young person who has experienced the abusive behaviors. Dating abuse can affect many aspects of the life of the young person, including their health, safety, and academic success. Teens that are experiencing dating abuse have increased rates of suicidal thoughts and attempts of suicide, fighting, drug, alcohol, and tobacco use, risky sexual behaviors that can lead to unplanned pregnancies, STIs, or HIV. If the survivor or the youth who is perpetrating abuse attend the same school, so if the survivor and the abusive partner and the survivor attend the same school, survivors may have trouble concentrating on schoolwork. They may not even want to show up to school, because they don't want to see that person. They may have conflict with a teacher, get into fights with other students, or even drop out. They may be isolated from friends or show a lack of interest in former activities. They may be constantly checking their cell phone or showing distress when they are asked to turn a phone off. These teens are also at a risk of suffering physical injuries as a result of abuse, with around 75% of girls and 50% of boys who experience dating abuse reporting an injury as a result of the violence. On the other hand, it is also important to keep an eye out for the red flags that might indicate if a teen is perpetrating the abuse in a relationship. And I think oftentimes when we talk about dating abuse, we forget that, we're talking about young people, and we're talking about youth who need help in identifying the poor behaviors or the bad behaviors that they are exhibiting. And so being able to identify when a person might be perpetrating abusive behaviors is key to helping intervene and to stop that behavior and to help the survivor. Watch for warning signs in the young people that you regularly interact with. Here are some examples of what to watch out for. Suddenly failing grades or other academic trouble when there previously had not been. Attendance or disciplinary problems, particularly if this hasn't been a problem in the past. Acting withdrawn, quieter than usual, or angry and irritable when someone asks how that student is doing, how that young person is doing. And to the extremes, threatening suicide or self-harm, and minimizing violent behavior. So if you do witness something or you do see something, them minimizing that violent behavior or presenting themselves as a victim. There can also be physical signs similar to what a survivor experienced, but stress-related physical signs and physical impacts. So, a perpetrator of abusive behaviors may also be exhibiting certain physical signs and sicknesses and illnesses that didn't present themselves before. So it's important to learn the obstacles to identifying abuse and to seeking help that many young people face so that you can share this information with the young people you may be around or you work with. This slide shows not necessarily the obstacles to identifying abuse, but it shows different types of abusive behaviors that young people have a hard time seeing as abuse. So just to give you a few of these, checking your cell phone or your email without permission, or stealing a password, or wanting passwords to all of your information online. A lot of young people who we see here at Break the Cycle will bring these up as things going on in their relationship, and they may not be able to identify that that's an inappropriate or unhealthy behavior in their relationship, that that person is attempting to control them or to monitor them. A major obstacle that young people face is a lack of information about what a healthy relationship looks like. So, one way that we have shared this information with young people is to compare healthy, unhealthy, and abusive actions to a person who is healthy, who has a cold, or who has the flu. Young people share with us examples of what is healthy in a relationship, as with a healthy person, what can be unhealthy, as with a person who has a cold, and what is abusive, as with a person who has the flu. Once you know and understand the warning signs, the warning signs listed on this slide, they can be better equipped to identify the warning signs in their own relationships. You may not necessarily see any of these things yourself, but if you suspect a young person is in an abusive relationship, share these, I will say warning signs, but really abusive or unhealthy or potentially abusive behaviors with young people to help them identify whether or not that's happening in their relationships. A young person may not feel empowered to report relationship abuse due to many different types of obstacles. Be sensitive to the unique obstacles that young people face in recognizing and seeking help for abusive relationships. Teens are often new to relationships and may have difficulty sorting through the many messages they receive every day from friends, family, the media, etc., about what relationships should look like and how men and women should behave. Young people who have children with their abusive partner may be concerned about losing financial support or child care if they try to end an abusive relationship, or they may not want to see their child's other parent get into trouble with school or with the law, despite wanting the abuse to stop. Adolescents are hardwired to be skeptical or even distrustful of adults. Even to reach out for help is a courageous step that should be recognized and rewarded. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be sharing more with you about these other pieces of this puzzle. So the what can you do, know what to say, know your role, share resources, be accessible. But I would like to leave you with a couple of tips for responding to a young person who may be sharing with you that they are experiencing abuse. The most important thing you can do is to be supportive of the young people in your life. This is true for parents, educators, community members, and really anyone who interacts with teens. If a teen discloses to you that they are experiencing abuse, believe them. Tell them you are glad they came to you and that you've been taking their situation seriously. Tell them that they deserve to be treated with respect by their dating partner and that the abuse is not their fault. Many young people don't ask adults for help because they fear not being believed, being blamed, dismissed, or belittled. And unfortunately, that fear comes true more often than we'd like. This slide shows a few examples or tips of the words you can actually say when a young person tells you that they are experiencing abuse. You deserve to be treated with respect. This is important. I believe you. It's not your fault. I am here if you ever need help or want to talk. It can be very hard to know what to say in the moment that a young person comes to you with a disclosure of this kind. Very, very hard, especially if it's your own child. Practicing these words, having them in the back of your mind can help in that moment. Even when teens are able to ask for help, they aren't always able to get the help they need. Despite experiencing many of the same forms of abuse as adults, teens don't always have access to the same resources as adults. They have limited financial resources, access to transportation, and even limitations placed on them by school schedules may put up additional barriers to accessing services. Also, many services that we consider vital to the safety of adult survivors of domestic violence, such as shelters and protection or restraining orders, aren't easily accessible to teens because of legal restrictions placed on them. They may require significant parental involvement or consent, which poses an additional burden on a teen who can't turn to their parent for help. In some cases, these services may not be accessible at all. For example, in a handful of states, individuals in a dating relationship do not qualify for domestic violence protection orders, leaving many teens locked out of the court system entirely. Even after succeeding in court, teens that go to the same school as an abusive partner often have to navigate yet another obstacle in working with the school to enforce their protection order. Knowing these limitations can help you be a better resource for a young person. As we wrap up today, I'd like to point out a really great video, public service announcement, a PSA, created by the Love is Respect National Youth Advisory Board. Love is Respect has a National Youth Advisory Board that they formed a couple of years ago that has comprised of 23 young people who are located across the nation and to contribute at a national level to the conversation around dating abuse and respect and healthy relationships. As we look ahead to our roles educating and supporting young people, it is vital that we listen to the voices of young people to guide us in this work. This video is available at the besmartbewell.com, the website that is on your screen. After we're done with the webinar, please take a second to check it out. It's a really neat video and I think is a great tool for any of the work that you're doing to support anti-violence movements or just for your own knowledge. So let's take a second and do a recap of the goals for today's webinar just to make sure that we have met our goals. First, we wanted to talk about defining and understanding the dynamics of dating abuse. Second, to understand the key influencers of dating abuse among young people. And finally, to identify the warning signs and obstacles of dating abuse. I hope that we have been able to meet these goals today. And before we close, I would like to share with you a few national resources just to make sure you have them on hand as we move forward in our work. The first is loveisrespect.org. I don't know if we needed to have that on there twice, but just to make sure it's in your minds. The National Dating Abuse Helpline, which is a 24/7 hotline and is staffed by youth advocates, so it's young people receiving the calls of young people. Young people can also access advocates through the phone at 1-866-331-9474 or via text message at 22522. You can also chat online. There's an online chat function for reaching an advocate. And finally, our website at Break the Cycle is www.breakthecycle.org. If you'd like to contact me to ask any questions or for any follow-up, my name again is Kelly Hampton, and my email is khampton@breakthecycle.org. You can also email our expert email at expert@breakthecycle.org. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you at our next webinar, September 17th.